Mom.
If we push too hard, something will push back.
What happens next is my favorite part.
2 episodes left. 2 episodes to answer questions that this show has been building towards for 4 entire seasons. And after what I genuinely believe was the strongest episode of the season so far, the trailer for episode 8 has just dropped, and it is doing exactly what I feared and hoped it would do at the same time. It is not giving anything away easily. It is not handing us the answers on a plate. Instead, it is layering tension on top of tension, threading new information into old mysteries, and positioning every single character right at the edge of something they cannot come back from. The finale is close. And from the looks of this trailer, the road getting there is going to be one of the darkest stretches this show has ever put its characters through. So let's break it all down. Here is from Season 4 Episode 8 Trailer Explained. Boyd and Kenny doing it right. The trailer opens with Boyd and Kenny, and right away Boyd says something that tells you everything about where his head is at going into this episode. He says, "If we're going to do this, we're going to have to do it right. I'm not going to leave people down there." And then the sentence gets cut off by gunshots, which we'll come back to. But just from those few words alone, you can already feel the shift in Boyd's thinking. Because let's be honest about what just happened. Kenny went into those caves as part of what was essentially a test run. The whole purpose of that mission was to figure out whether the totems had any effect on the monsters. And what they found out is that they don't work at all. The totems are useless against them. And while that information is genuinely important to have going forward, the cost of getting it nearly broke everything. Kenny almost died. Not in a vague theoretical sense. He was moments away from being killed by Smiley, and Boyd could do nothing but watch from a window. He couldn't get to him. He couldn't stop it. He just had to stand there and watch someone he cares about almost get taken. That kind of moment changes a person. And for Boyd specifically, it changes the way he thinks about leadership and responsibility. Because Christy said it to him plainly in the most recent episode. There are a lot of lives in his hands. And Boyd already knew that, but hearing it out loud while Kenny was still recovering from what happened in those caves, it lands differently. It settles into him in a way that's going to reshape the plan entirely. So when he says he wants to do it right, I think what he's really saying is that he is not sending anybody back into those caves until he has a way to protect them from the monsters. Because right now they have nothing. The totems failed. They don't have a weapon that works. They don't have a strategy that accounts for Smiley being down there and being hostile. And Boyd knows that going in without that is not bravery. It's just sending people to die. So I think this scene is about Boyd slowing down the plan, reassessing, and trying to figure out what doing it right actually looks like when everything they thought would protect them has already been proven not to work. The question now is whether the rest of the group gives him the time to figure that out. Because as we'll get into later in this breakdown, not everyone in that group is feeling patient right now. The gunshots. Henry and Sophia's grip. Now the gunshots. This is the part of the trailer that I keep coming back to because it's so deliberately vague. You hear them, but the trailer doesn't show you who fired or why or what they were aimed at. And I think that vagueness is intentional because whoever fired those shots and whatever they were firing at is going to be one of the more unsettling moments in the episode. My strongest theory right now is Henry. And I say that because of everything that has been building around him over the last few episodes. Sophia has a grip on him. That's not speculation at this point. It's just what's happening. She has been slowly pulling him away from reality, feeding him a version of events that makes him believe the town isn't real, that everything he's experiencing is just a hallucination, and that somewhere out there he's lying in a hospital bed and just needs to wake up. She showed him a vision of being outside the town entirely. She let him feel what it was like to be somewhere else. And for someone who has already been struggling with the weight of everything that's happened, that kind of manipulation is extraordinarily dangerous. Because here's what worries me most about Henry right now. If Sophia can make him see things, if she can project images into his mind that feel completely real, then she can make him see a threat that doesn't exist. She can show him something approaching him, something that in his mind is absolutely real and absolutely dangerous, and he could react to it the way any person would react to a genuine threat. He could pick up a weapon and fire. And the nightmare scenario is that whatever he fires at isn't a monster. It's a person. Someone standing in the wrong place at the wrong moment while Henry is trapped inside a hallucination that Sophia constructed specifically to get him to pull that trigger. That's the darkest version of this. And I'm not saying that's definitely what happens. But given where Henry's storyline has been going and given what Sophia is capable of, I don't think it's far off. There was a shot of Henry later in the trailer where he's cooking and fixating on something approaching him. And the look on his face isn't panic exactly. It's that unsettling, disconnected kind of focus that someone has when they're not entirely sure what's real anymore. That look tells me his grip on reality is continuing to loosen, and Sophia is the one pulling it apart thread by thread. An alternative for the gunshots could be Acosta. But I genuinely can't find a clear reason why she would be randomly firing a weapon at this point in the story. That's why I keep coming back to Henry. He's the one with the least control over himself right now, and he's the one being directly manipulated by something that can shape what he sees and hears and believes. Roger's body, Sophia playing with her food. After the gunshots, the trailer moves to Colony House and Acosta is standing outside as the residents appear to be burning a body. And I'm fairly confident that body is Roger. To recap what happened, Sophia performed what can only be described as a deeply disturbing kind of resurrection. She gave a life for a life and brought Roger back in human form, but in a state that was genuinely horrifying. His mouth was sewn shut. His eyes had buttons on them. He came back, but he came back wrong, completely petrified, with no understanding of what was happening to him or around him. And then Elgin put the totem into him and that was it. He was gone again. So now the group has a body. And as Boyd said in the previous episode, there's simply no room left in the graveyard. After Jim and the pastor, the graveyard is full. So burning the body is the only option they have for disposal, and that's almost certainly what we're seeing in this shot. But here's what I find genuinely interesting about this moment in the trailer. Sophia appears to be standing in the distance, overlooking the whole thing. Just watching. And that detail feels important because it suggests she hasn't moved on from Roger. She's still paying attention to what the group does with him. And that raises a question I can't quite shake. What if she's not done with him yet? Because think about what Sophia has been doing across this season. She's not just attacking people. She's not just sending the monsters after them. She's playing with them. She's finding ways to frighten them, to destabilize them, to make them feel like nothing they do matters because she can always take it a step further. And using Roger's body one more time, maybe making him move or come back just long enough to terrify the people standing around his burning body, that is exactly the kind of move she would make. It's dark. It's cruel. But it fits completely with who she is and what she's been doing. Sophia is enjoying this. She's not in a hurry. And that makes her significantly more dangerous than any enemy that's trying to finish things quickly. Fatima's connection, the golem and Smiley. This is the part of the trailer that I'm most invested in, and I think it's going to be one of the most important scenes in the episode. Boyd, Fatima, Donna, and Ellis are all together, and Boyd asks Fatima directly, "You're saying you saw Kenny in trouble?" And Fatima responds with something that stops everything. She says, "I didn't just see him, Boyd. It's like I was there." Now, the first thing I want to say is that I'm genuinely glad she's not keeping this to herself. Because the pattern in this show, the thing that consistently makes situations worse, is characters holding on to information that other people need. Julie is doing it right now with the story walking. She knows things and she's keeping them close, and that withholding is going to cost someone eventually. So the fact that Fatima is bringing this to the group immediately, that she's not sitting on it and trying to process it alone, that's actually meaningful. It suggests she understands that whatever this connection is, it's bigger than her, and it needs to be out in the open. And the connection itself is something the show has been quietly building towards for a while now. Fatima gave birth to Smiley. That is the foundation of everything here. That bond between a mother and a child, even when that child has become something monstrous, doesn't just disappear. It exists on some level that the town seems to be able to access and amplify. And I think what Fatima experienced, this sense of being present with Kenny even though she wasn't physically there, was the golem working. Because think about what the golem was built for. It was created as a form of protection. That was its entire purpose. And I've been thinking about the fact that it hasn't seemed to do anything overtly. It hasn't come to life in the way that some people might have expected. And I think that's because its protection isn't physical. It's not going to stand up and fight a monster. Its protection is something more subtle and more interesting than that. It's creating a kind of awareness. A connection that lets Fatima perceive danger before it becomes fatal. So when Kinney was down in those caves and Smiley was closing in on him, Fatima felt it. She was pulled into it because of the golem and because of the bond she has with Smiley. And that experience was real enough that she felt like she was standing right there beside Kinney. What this could mean going forward is enormous. If Fatima can perceive what Smiley perceives, or at least perceive danger connected to him, then she might be the most valuable person in the group when they eventually go back into those caves. She could serve as a kind of early warning system. She might even be able to do something more active, something closer to what the man in yellow does when he holds influence over the creatures and the residents of the town. If Fatima can develop that connection and learn to use it, she could potentially hold some kind of sway over Smiley in a way that nobody else in the group is capable of. And that is exactly why this information needs to stay away from Sophia and the man in yellow. Because if he finds out that Fatima has any kind of connection to Smiley, any kind of influence over him, he will shut it down immediately. He will not allow that variable to exist. So the group keeping this quiet is not just strategically smart. It might be the difference between having a chance and having that chance taken away before they can use it. Then Ellis says to Fatima, "Show me." And honestly, I'm not entirely sure what Ellis thinks she's going to be able to show him. Maybe he wants her to try and connect with Smiley deliberately, in a controlled way, to see if the vision comes on demand or only happens instinctively. It's a reasonable thing to want to test. But I'll be honest, Ellis asking that question and then standing there expecting Fatima to perform on command is very on brand for a character who doesn't always think through what he's asking before he asks it. Still, the idea of Fatima actively trying to reach out through that connection, of her sitting with the golem and deliberately opening herself up to whatever Smiley is experiencing, that's a fascinating and frightening prospect. Because there's no guarantee that she can control what comes in when she opens that door. Ethan, Victor, and the weight of knowing. The next scene in the trailer is one that hit me harder than I expected it to. Ethan says to Victor, "I want you to teach me how to survive when I'm alone." And Tabitha immediately responds with, "You're not going to be here alone, Ethan." And then Ethan looks at her and says quietly, "You don't know that." That's a devastating thing for a child to say. And the reason it's devastating is because he's right. Tabitha doesn't know that. Nobody knows that. And Ethan has clearly been paying attention to Victor's story closely enough to understand what the parallel means. Victor arrived in the town with his sister. The two of them came together just like Ethan and Julie. And what followed that arrival, what the presence of those two children seemed to trigger or coincide with, was the massacre. The catastrophic event that wiped out nearly everyone, and left Victor utterly alone for decades. He survived. But he survived as a child with no one around him, learning to exist in a town full of horrors with nothing but his own instincts and whatever scraps of knowledge he could piece together over time. Victor sees that cycle repeating. He sees Ethan and Julie and he recognizes the shape of it. And because he recognizes it, he feels a responsibility to prepare Ethan for the worst possible outcome. Not because he wants that outcome, but because he knows better than anyone what it feels like to be completely unprepared for it. And here's what I think is going to make this scene genuinely affecting to watch. Victor doesn't have a filter. He's not going to soften things for Ethan the way adults usually do for children. He's going to tell him the truth. He's going to tell him about the man in yellow and what he does and what he's capable of. He's going to tell him things about this town that Ethan has probably sensed but hasn't had confirmed yet. And Ethan is going to have to sit with all of that information and figure out what it means for him and for his family. I also think this is the moment where some of what Ethan saw back in episode 2 might come back up. He saw his father. He had that experience near the lake, and it's been sitting there quietly in the background ever since. If Victor is going to be fully honest with Ethan about the nature of this place, about the souls that might be trapped here and the things that appear to people who are close to losing their grip, then Ethan mentioning his father feels like a natural part of that conversation. And I think it could open up something significant about what the Lake of Tears actually is and what it means for the people who've already been lost. But there's another layer to this that I think is worth sitting with. If Victor is teaching Ethan how to survive alone, it means Victor knows that his own time might be running out. He wouldn't be doing this if he thought he was going to be around to help. He's essentially preparing his replacement. And for a character who has survived longer than almost anyone in this town, that quiet acceptance of what might be coming feels enormously heavy. Jade and the hard decisions. Then we get to the moment in the trailer that felt like the emotional peak of the whole thing. Jade says, There's a reason that no one has ever gotten out of here. And maybe that reason is no one has ever been willing to make the hard decisions before. This line is doing a lot of work. And I think it's coming from a place of real frustration in Jade, frustration that's been building for a while now. Because Jade went on that trip. He saw what he saw. He came back with information and a genuine belief that what he experienced was real, and that it could be the way out. And now he's watching the group hesitate. He's watching them second-guess the plan after what happened with Kenny. He's watching people look at Roger's situation and feel the weight of the cost and start to pull back. And Jade's point, as uncomfortable as it is, isn't entirely wrong. Every time this group has gotten close to something, the thing that has stopped them hasn't always been the monsters or Sophia or the man in yellow. Sometimes it's been the inability to commit fully. The inability to accept that getting out of this place might require making choices that feel impossible. Sacrificing something or someone. Taking a risk that can't be undone. And Jade is essentially saying out loud what nobody else in the group wants to say. That the way out might cost something real. And if they're not willing to pay that cost, they're never going to find it. Now, I don't think Jade is being cruel here. I think he's being honest in the way that only someone who has genuinely seen something on the other side of all this can be. He knows there's something out there. He believes it with everything he has. And watching the people around him get cold feet when they're this close is making him lose patience fast. The question is whether his frustration pushes him to do something unilateral. Something the group doesn't agree to, but that he decides to do anyway because he's convinced it's the only path forward. That's the version of Jade that worries me a little. Not because he's wrong, but because acting alone in this town without the group behind you has historically ended very badly. Donna and what she saw. There's a shot of Donna in the trailer reacting to something, and I think it connects to Fatima's revelation about seeing Kenny. But Donna's reaction feels like it carries its own weight separate from just responding to what Fatima said. Because I've been thinking about Donna since she came back.